I mean, to me, an indie creator is someone who is, I mean, quite simply making it work on their own. They might have, it might be more than a one-person team. It might be 2, 3, 4 people. I mean, it could even be more. It's someone who is not tied to a larger organization that is funding their project.
You know, that's Sky Pillsbury talking about independent creators. And to me, Adam Curry embodies that independent creator spirit, I think, as well as anybody. By the way, if you're interested in Sky, you'll hear more from her in our next episode because she's got a lot of great insights as well. But independent creators, typically, it's small teams. You and I are both independent creators. I mean, we have our job with Castos. You are more involved than I am, but we have our job with Castos, but even Castos is a pretty small, scrappy team, and we're really, I think, there to, empower and help independent creators and small organizations. And all that's to say is I think an independent creator, has different needs, and I think central to that is RSS and the ability to distribute your show to many different platforms and directories.
When we were talking about Podcasting 2.0 with Tanner Campbell in the last episode, Adam Curry is the lead. He's the if there were a CEO at Podcasting 2.0, it would be Adam Curry. You can tune into his podcast, Podcasting 2.0, every Friday. That's called The Board Meeting, and in the essence of that, in open source fashion, is that he and Dave Jones, who one would say would be the CTO of Podcasting 2.0, they get together and literally talk about the issues facing the code, from the code to the community to the industry. So when we start talking about value for value, and with Adam, that for the small creator, to me, is the essence of rolling up your sleeves and putting in the hard work to monetize your show, because a platform like a Spotify will do it only for a little bit for a big chunk of money. I can't call up Apple. I can't call up Spotify and say, you know what I don't like about your podcast directory? Like, if you could just add this website link to my profile, that'd be great. There isn't any of that. And with Podcasting 2.0, that there is, right? Literally there is. You can join their social network. You can talk to them there. You can help contribute to the code. It is, I keep using the word essence, the essence of value for value. You're getting value from Podcasting 2.0 as a creator. You can give value back in terms of either money or support or help. And that's what I really like about the Podcasting 2.0 movement and value for value.
Right. And part and parcel to all that is the Podfather himself, Adam Curry. So you guys had a wonderful conversation. I was lucky to have a front row seat to that. Let's listen in.
Having a million listeners is not as important to me as having 10,000 who are really engaged with the product, with the production of it. That's just how I happen to view podcasts. I like my listeners to be producers, and I'll address them as such, and support me financially. So that's a whole different lifestyle. It's a whole different way of looking at what success means in podcasting. I've always just wanted to have complete freedom. I want that feedback loop, and I want to be able to pay the rent. Not necessarily in that order. The rent might come sooner than close to the top of the list. So there's this, I think, fallacy that growing your podcast will get you to that endpoint, whatever that endpoint is, because typically, in order to grow your podcast big enough to have sustainability, you're going to have a lot of people listening. And I just don't think there's enough hours in the day for humans that are capable of listening to be able to do that for everybody. Now, is there a lot of room for a lot of podcasts to have smaller audiences and for it to be quote unquote successful for them? Yeah, most definitely. And, it's way below the trend of population growth. So as long as the population grows over time, we'll probably be okay. But to hit, 7 or 8 billion, you got to have a lot of podcasts with small amounts of listeners. So growing your podcast just sounds like an empty phrase, and and what always comes along with that is, here's how you grow your podcast. And then there's all these places you got to put your podcast. You got to manage your podcast. You've got to do newsletters and all these different things. And there's all these solutions which are algorithmic and, or we hope, and discovery. This is the big thing, is discovery. Discovery is something that we need. And YouTube provides discovery, and Facebook this time. And I've never seen any evidence that that's true. Growing a podcast really, to me, works by telling your existing audience, hey, turn someone onto this podcast. Now you have, let's say you have 1,000 people listening. Now you have, maybe, let's say in a small group like that, you'll probably get 10% that will do it. But I think everyone will have it in the back of their mind. Oh yeah, I should probably tell people about this podcast. Now you have HI. You got human intelligence out there. And as we call on the No Agenda show, hitting your friends in the mouth. Like, bam, dude, you should listen to this. That's it. I have tons of evidence of that being a way to grow your podcast. And what that means is people typically take a recommendation from their friend or family member very differently than an algorithmic recommendation that pops up somewhere in an interruptive way.
At Castos, since we have so many newbies coming onto the platform, I think a lot of this, throw my hands up and just give it to Spotify and YouTube, is because people are so exhausted after they've figured out which microphone, how to connect this stuff up, record the show, edit the show, find people to do this stuff, cover all this critical thinking. I think there's a big swath of amateur newbies who come into this and God, now I have to think about marketing and growing this thing. Are you serious? And I think that's where a lot of folks that we've actually interviewed for this series who think Spotify and YouTube will be the vehicle to monetization for a lot of us, I think they look at it as all that stuff is too hard. Nobody wants it, right? Nobody wants to do all the stuff you have to do to create your own organic outreach. Just let Spotify tell us what to do.
What we already knew inherently, but what we learned really by starting podcastindex.org is, we have a real good overview of what's out there. And we have a lot of very smart people in the group. And, the entire database is downloadable. You can sift through it. You can get anything you want from it, except for the email addresses associated with the RSS feeds. We're not totally stupid. We know what you want, spammers. But you'll see that the majority of podcasts, I'm talking overwhelming majority, probably 80 to 85%, they have no business model at all. They're just doing a podcast. So that's fine. Now, I think there's a misrepresentation that says, well, if you get on all these platforms and you manage and just look at the hosting business in general, there's all these connectors, we'll connect you to Spotify. It was a unique selling proposition. Now it's a little more commoditized, but it's this hosting company, we'll make sure you're everywhere. But is that really the answer? I just found out that 2 of my shows, Mo Facts and No Agenda, haven't showed up on Apple iTunes for, a couple episodes. So, and just something wrong, or maybe who knows what's going on. We'll figure it out. But I didn't even notice that. No, it's just a few people because, people are I'll just use this or I'll do it some other way. And, it doesn't seem to be the most important thing. If you look at France, most French podcasts are not even even submitted to Apple. They don't want to be in it. So the idea that everyone deserves to make a business out of this, as in, like a traditional media business where it's the actual product. So, you have a program that is not serving a specific community as kind of a community chat, so, there is a knitting podcast and they may have some sponsorship, but it's not really a media property that is going to take sponsor, it's going to be actively soliciting sponsorship from Verizon and Pfizer and, and any BMW. It could happen, but, it's highly unlikely, particularly with the scale that they have. So it's like blogging in the beginning. It's the same thing. And it took years for people to figure out, there's going to be a few bloggers who, make $1 million or do very well, and whether it's subscription or whatever it is, but it's not just because they wrote on a blog and some algorithm got you advertising. I think slowly people are starting to see that is just not something that's really true or sustainable. Even YouTube now, and Twitch. I mean, all these different places are cutting the revenues. They're giving less to the creators. There's no insight. There's no transparency. You don't control anything except your uploads. You don't even know if the counts that they're showing you are right. You don't know any of this stuff. And I think people are slowly starting to see, well, it's really not worth it. So if you're interested in making a sustainable living, we've figured out a couple of ways to do that without necessarily having an audience that you grow to a size large enough. And I don't know, what are we talking with CPMs these days? $23 a CPM. So if you want to make $2,300 a month, I would say, you'd have to have, let's say you do a show a week. So that's 4. So, I mean, how many people do you have to have? Like 100,000 people to even get close? You know, so maybe it's 30,000, and you can get them. But will the ad be counted if the same person hears it twice? And there's a whole bunch of parameters to that. So unlikely. That's a lot of people. It took me a long time to get where we are with No Agenda. It took 15 years. Okay, now we're 1.3, 1.4 million. We don't really actually know, but we also don't care. We can pay the rent.
I want to talk about value for value next. I don't want to define it because I'm sitting in front of you and I'm way too nervous to define it. So you do it best. I say it's the thing I always wanted from cable TV. Like, I don't want to pay for all of these channels, and I quite literally only want to pay for the minutes I've spent watching these shows. Define value for us.
Well, value for value is something that John C. Dvorak and I kind of stumbled upon by accident, 14 and a half years ago, when we started the No Agenda podcast, and it was just basically us just talking for half an hour. And as the show progressed, and we were only doing once a week, it turned into be a lot of work because we were deconstructing media. This is 14 years ago, so we were starting to get clips and starting to record those, and a lot of effort went into this. And we said to the audience, this is really, we're having a lot of fun here, but you're gonna have to send us some money because this is not working. It's too much work. We're putting a lot of value out, and we have no way of getting anything back. And we know we can't take advertising because the stuff we were discussing it, the way we were discussing it, it was just not brand friendly. And I was at the time running a podcast network, which I, partially through the No Agenda experience, learned that podcast networks don't work. Different conversation for, different time maybe. But so we started off with the typical, I think it was, give us $3 an episode. If you give us $3 an episode, we'll be real happy. And we set it up with a PayPal form, $3, click, and you could do a subscription. And we got the typical disappointing results. We got about 100 people, $3, but that's not really going to work for 2 guys doing 4 shows a month. And as we were discussing this, we were talking about the value and the value we felt that we brought. We're very arrogant. The value we felt we brought to the table. And we said, this is, and now we're doing an hour and a half show. And I say, if you went to the movies and took a date and had some popcorn and a drink, that would be $50. Was our hour and a half worth $50, or did you just waste your time? I mean, it had to be worth something if you're listening to me after an hour and a half. So what was it worth to you? This is an intangible product. You can't really say this type of, rare earth minerals went into it, this much lithium and oil power generate. It's hard to value it that way. And traditionally, Silicon Valley has always valued intangible media products. In fact, at the time, the iPhone was just about to come out. And we already had the iPod, of course, and Silicon Valley, i.e. Apple, Steve Jobs priced it. He ripped the album apart, which was part of the big problem for the music industry. You're no longer buying an album product; you're buying per track, and the price was fixed at 99 cents. Man, if you really asked me what would I pay to hear the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, I think one of the best love songs ever written, I'll pay $99. If you ask me. So the next show, we looked at our PayPal, and sure enough, there was a lot of $3 still, but there was also people sending $5, quite a few sending $50, and a couple $500. We never looked back from that moment on. We just refined what this meant and what this value for value was. And when you zoom out after these 15 years, value for value is a monetization model. It's also a program content format, because there is a specific way you apply it with variations, and it ultimately can become a lifestyle. But as we refine this model throughout the years, it has become incredibly successful, but it has one really high barrier, and this is the barrier of asking. And we've studied all kinds. In fact, I'm writing a manifesto. Together, we're writing a book. It will come out value for value with examples and ways to do this. But the hardest part is the ask, and it's counterintuitive to any type of media you've ever seen, except for maybe public broadcast when they do the big fund drive. And hey, if you send us money, this corporation will match it. We'll send you a tote bag. All this stuff. Now, this is not the point. You're asking people specifically, did you get any value out of the product we made? If so, just tell me what that is and send it back. And people take that to an extreme. They start to get into numerology and sending money with certain numbers that are meaningful. And there's a note reading aspect to it. So there's a recognition. And my wife is a C-suite level communications professional. She most recently worked for Ronald McDonald House Charities. So she works a lot with donations. And she said, the number one reason why people don't give to a good cause. I said, I had a lot of different ideas. He said, because they never were asked. You'd be surprised. If you don't ask, people don't think about it. So you have to get over the hump of, man, this feels weird, asking people to support me. So I always say the value for value model is not asking for support. It's saying, this is what I delivered in value. You can give me nothing for it, which means you didn't value it, but then you need to question yourself, why you're listening. If it's of zero value, if it's $1, that's fine. Some people, they've changed careers, changed relationships, whatever it is they attribute to listening to a podcast I do, and they'll send thousands of dollars. And then, so that now becomes a format that you can base your show upon, which also monetizes it. And as I said, you start to kind of live that way. And then you expand from money to the 3 T's, which is time, talent, treasure. So it's just as valuable for someone to set up a server infrastructure so we can host the show, and they need to get credit for that continuously, as it is for someone to help me pay the rent. It all has to go somewhere. So, and total transparency is key. Someone donates, we're going to tell the world how much it was. That also turns into gamification because that also excites a lot of people. So there's so many aspects to this that as we write the book on value for value, we're actually going to figure out what that is, because we haven't really codified everything for ourselves.
Yeah, as long as we don't call it tips. Because...
Well, you can. If you want to say it's the exact same mechanism, if you say, hey, just tip me, guess what you're going to get? Tips. You're going to get tips. You're not going to get you're going to get 15 to 20%. You're not going to get 100% because you literally ask someone for a tip. If you say, hey, what was this worth to you? Like I was just consulting, literally consulting is a big word, but a friend of mine in the Netherlands, he went from mainstream, big television show, completely value for value. And he's refining his pitch. And people said value for value wouldn't even work outside of America. Oh, it's only a typical American thing. And so I was hell-bent on seeing if we could make this work for him. And he started off with merchandise, some typical ways. And he started to slip a little bit into, hey, if you can support us, that'd be great. And then just the other day, I heard him, and he started off by saying, hey, I'm doing all this for free. Can you support us? And I called him up and said, bro, no, you're not doing it for free. You want people to give you value back. So instead of saying, hey, here I am, basically he was saying, tip me, toss a brother a dime. I said, look, you're a professional. You gave up an entire career to do this. You're delivering this value, and people can determine themselves what they want to pay for it. And immediately he saw a change. And this is, in my mind, the only way forward for media products, really of any kind, music, books, video, movies, podcast, whatever you want to call it. It's all a podcast to me, really. There's no way that we can continue to pay multiple subscriptions to all these different services. So kind of coming back to what you were always looking for is, hey, I'd really just like to play it or consume this on a per minute basis or a per episode basis. The drawback there is, again, you have all these disparate financial systems. You have to recreate a profile, put your card down everywhere, maybe use different players. There's all these things. And again, the prices will be set. And, you may just not feel like one podcast that you pay maybe $1 an episode, it's like if you have 10 of those, you're going to eventually drop one of those too. So, maybe this one episode of the No Agenda Show didn't excite you. Don't give us anything. Hey, that's fair. And that's the way it should work. It sure holds me accountable. When donations are down, I look deep inside myself. I'm not thinking these people are dicks. I'm thinking, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? You always look for external factors, but it's typically, a mix of a whole bunch of things. And it's very exciting. Now, is it scary for some to live that way on that kind of scale? Yeah, I'm sure it is. It was scary for me too. But over time, it becomes exhilarating and incredibly rewarding.
Platforms will never support this, right? You're never going to have this thing that Spotify wants their cut, Apple wants their cut, etc. Podcasting 2.0, we're really, or you guys are really setting not only the mindset for it, but the infrastructure for it. I say Podcasting 2.0 is an open source movement for powering RSS for podcasting. Is that a fair statement, Adam, or do you look at Podcasting 2.0 as something wholly different?
Well, so this is always an ongoing conversation. What is Podcasting 2.0? Well, it's the whole idea of calling it Podcasting 2.0, which in hindsight is very poor because you can't get a good URL for it. A domain name doesn't work. It doesn't work in searches. It's like the stupidest thing I could have come up with. But the idea was it's a version better of 1.0. And what specifically did we set out to do in the beginning? It's turned into a much bigger beast. We set out to protect podcasting from deplatforming, since Apple had just become the default on-ramp to podcasting. No, that's not, and it's okay because they were good stewards for 10 years, longer than that. But, wait a minute, you're going to start kicking people off and you're doing that in coordination with other tech companies. No, so you can't be the on-ramp. There should be no on-ramp, which is why we luckily have a hosting community of companies that is quite distributed, decentralized. That's really part of the beauty of podcasting right there. And we always need to maintain that in some form or other. And ultimately, all you need to have is some server somewhere, a text editor you can make an RSS file with, and an audio file or whatever it is you want to distribute. That part is the protection, so that we wanted apps to be able to be created with a solid base, so an app developer can just go crazy, be creative, create an app that they want to, and have all the data at their disposal. We'll create the endpoints in the API, whatever it is you need, developer, we're going to give it to you. We want you to be successful and create cool stuff. So the second part of that is what's successful. As we were going through this anti-deplatforming infrastructure that we're building, which is podcastindex.org, I saw the need to also have an uninterruptible payment system. And I just started learning about the Lightning Network, which allows you to transfer, well, I call it broadcasting money, because that's what I saw. It's like I can actually send a stream of money to anybody who has a wallet that's compatible. I don't need permission. I can just send it to you. Like, here's some money. Well, if I can do that, then why not combine the two things and actually do something very revolutionary in the payment world, which is put the payment button right above the play button. In fact, we've connected the play button to the pay button. When you click on play in a Podcasting 2.0 app, you are immediately streaming money. The amount is at your discretion to the podcaster who is giving you that value in MP3 form at the same time. This was the revolutionary concept. Now, we added to that something that was desperately needed, is the success for the entire ecosystem. So what is the upside for an app developer who develops a podcast app? Well, you can sell a subscription to it, maybe, if you got lots of features, but that does require quite a lot of work, really. And, Marco, Overcast, does it full time. He's created a career out of it. There's not going to be a lot of room for many people. Again, you're back to subscriptions. You can purchase premium features, but a podcast app never saw any money of the ad money going to the Rogan show. They never got a piece of that. So how do they fit in? Enter the distributed digital royalty system known as the splits. So as a podcaster, you can determine at your discretion what percentage of every single payment goes to you and to anyone else you want. And automatically, again, at the discretion of the person using the app, they don't have to, 1% goes to Podcast Index to keep our operation running, and the app can decide whatever they want, by the way. It's typically between 1% and 4% for using their app. And the amount of people who have protested this idea, and in fact, it working now for almost 2 years, is zero. No one has ever, everyone's, oh, I'm totally happy to do it. What, I'm helping the app guy out? Sure. I'm helping this infrastructure? Sure. What
Do you see that
it?
as a thread? Do you see that as a thread of value for value? So like
It's
people just...
incredibly important, yes, because, I call it value for value. If we wanted to go raise some venture capital money, I'd call it Web3, because that's really what it is.
Right.
Everybody is contributing with their own agenda, with no contracts. Just, here's an API, it's what we offer. You hook into it, you create an app, that's what you offer. Podcaster comes along, says, here's my content. The listener comes along and says, dude, just give me an easy way to make the whole system work. What? One push of the button and it all goes and flows? That's what we've created. So to protect, enhance, and extend podcasting is truly our mission statement. Now, what happened with that is when we made this API available that software developers could come up and develop and potentially get a piece of the money that's flowing through the system, unleashed was over a decade of creativity, which never was able to come to fruition because we were stuck in this paradigm of, well, if the Apple app doesn't do it and the posting companies aren't going to do it, so it's just never going to happen, let's go form a nonprofit to talk about it. That's all that podcasting had become. And we still see remnants of that today while there's this group just working really hard on bringing new features. So once you extend RSS to enable the payments, the value for value streaming payments that we discussed, well, then you can add chapters and transcripts and person and geolocation and all these things that alternate enclosures, all these things that people have been wanting for years and years and years, but you didn't have both sides of the equation. So we just started doing it on the receiving side. And then luckily we saw forward-thinking, forward-looking companies and people like yourself, Matt, and Stuart, who said, yeah, why don't we support this? Why don't we get on board? Okay, everyone has their own timeline. Infrastructure changes can be messy and dangerous, so it goes slow. But you know what? We got our 1% coming in. The servers are still humming. We make no money, but that's okay. That's not what we're doing it for. I benefit indirectly from my shows being Podcasting 2.0. And so this is building. And I think we're even getting to the point where people are looking at using this value for value model with podcasting infrastructure for other types of media. In fact, we have a new feature tag in the podcast standards, which is the medium tag. So an app can recognize, hey, this is a track from an album, and it might change its appearance into more of a music player, but with the same properties that a podcast feed offers, including the streaming payments. So you can break down a song and you can have a portion go to each musician, a portion go to the songwriter, to the composer, and that will be that way in perpetuity. It would be different payments for the next track. And so all these things kind of start to meld together, and you see a future where for intangible media products, this is a very good way to go.
This is a tough question for me to frame because there's a lot of moving parts here. After running a bunch of other companies, some of which were public, how is this different to you where it's not like it's just an RSS feed, man, right? Like there's not all these other huge moving things. It's a lot of herding people. You're sort of corralling a bunch of developers, and we all know what developers are like. Or I've heard you have empathy on shows for the newbies. Don't poke fun that somebody doesn't know about Bitcoin or the Lightning wallet, because we need these people to adopt this. How different is this for you, just leading people, empathy? It's different than just like, go build a widget, let's price this widget, and let's just sell it for profit. Do you feel that difference? I feel a difference for you, but I don't know if you feel the same.
First of all, when I look at all the people who have just shown up with their own expertise and their own agenda, we have people who are helping build this, but they're more interested in aggregating data for something, or more, or interested in the music side. Everyone has a different reason. Some people are just, this is a great hobby. I just want to hang out with some interesting people. When I look at all the people and what they're contributing, I see a group that if you could even assemble this group, you could not afford the payroll. because they're that talented, that smart, that motivated. And when I look at it, sometimes we do developer Jitsi call, we'll get on a call and we'll chat about stuff. And that's not organized by any particular person. It's usually, we have one thing. I think the one thing I did that really made this community is, instead of it all being GitHub oriented, that's where we have discussions and we have a email list. I created a Mastodon server, podcastindex.social. So it's kind of like a social network without the annoying algos, and which means that discussions can be had, threaded discussions. But also, it's like when something scrolls off, then it's either the topic is done or there's no more flame war or it's over, So it just seems to work really well as a tool, a collaborative tool, a non-structured collaborative tool. It's the best company I've ever been involved in, the best company I've ever started, the most fun I've ever had in my life working for a company. And Dave really is in charge of all of the engineering and managing all of that stuff. So he's not really managing anyone either. He'll say, someone shows up all of a sudden, hey, I'm a professional documentation writer. Can I help? And Dave says, yes, here's what I need. And then we have the XML definition, and all this stuff is all done. And the documentation is incredibly detailed, exactly what a software developer would expect to see from a mature project. So Dave really does all of that. My job, if anything, is to break things, because what I bring to the table is uber user. So, I have feeds that total over, well over 1 million listeners or downloads per week. So when I do something, it can matter. When something breaks with my shit, it also matters. So we call it running with scissors. That's what podcasting 2.0 is. We're just running around with scissors, and sometimes, someone's eye gets poked out, but it's okay. We can pop it back in. We can continue. So we're doing just all kinds of dangerous stuff. And I have dreams. I dreamt up the concept and actually part of the technology 18 years ago. So my dreams now are very well defined, and the only thing that I do to quote unquote manage, which is not managing at all, is the exact same thing I did at podcasting 1.0. Is I started a podcast, and the podcast is all about this project. So we're talking about the people who are involved in it. We have the people who are involved in it on the podcast. We've had you on, Matt. So this is what this builds a community, and lo and behold, on this podcast, we ask for people to support the project, and it's working. We have the people, not just people who like what we're doing from the outside, but internally also supporting it. There's people who are getting money in Satoshis from the streaming value for value, putting it right back into Podcast Index. So it's a self-sustaining system. I'm opinionated. I have some standing in certain areas, but I'm certainly not right. And I love the pushback. I love people thinking they're right. There's no hierarchy. The only ultimately, I guess Dave and I can turn it off or on, but even that is not true, because everything's open source. You can recreate Podcast Index tomorrow. You can take the existing index, and we have a very small set of rules that we live by, which is actually Dave Weiner's rules for standards makers. Do a quick search and pull that up, and we follow that, and it works incredibly well. So, to answer your question, I am living my dream right now. I really am. I'm podcasting. I get to make podcasting better with this group of other people. I get to secure my future. But more importantly, I get to work with a lot of people who are in an upcoming generation who need this shit, who need an avenue to make sure they can actually communicate and not be taken down and get compensated and keep it sustainable, basically.
Are you able to look at value for value and podcasting 2.0? I mean, there's three things, right? Like, you are the champion of podcasting, hands down, the Podfather. And then we have value for value. And then we have podcasting 2.0. I guess, do you ever look at these and say, this one thing satisfies me the most? Like, I have left an impact on the world because I never gave up on podcasting. I created this value for value thing, or this podcasting 2.0 technology. Do you ever look at it that way? And do you have a favorite that you've achieved? Does that even make sense?
In general, I'm just the Podfather. Whether I invented, created, did the first one, well, it doesn't really matter. You kind of understand what that means. It doesn't matter that much to me either. I'll take that. And if people say that's what he did, fantastic. I'd love for it to be value for value, because this is the thing. And even though I've been living it for a decade and a half, now to see it available at everyone's fingertips, really within grasp in podcasting, because we've been able to bring it all into one interface, and we can really, and we've been able to add the payment system. But also, I'm just proud of the fact that Dave Jones and I sat down, and we've done this. We've been friends for 12 years. Like, hey man, I got this great. It's always the same. Hey man, I got this great idea for this product. This is going to be great. Let's make this. And Dave goes, okay, and then he makes it. And then we play with it. And no one else cares. And we've been doing this. And we've had products that I mean, I cannot live without the Freedom Controller. No one knows what it is. No one understands it when they see it. It's like, what the hell is it? It's a Swiss Army knife built basically for Adam and Dave. And some people get value out of it. But Podcasting 2.0, that was the one that hit. But it was the same pitch. Dave, hey man, Apple's doing this shit, and we should build our own index. Here's how I think we can do it. And look at this Lightning stuff. And I think we can do, like real-time value for value, because the term was known. And Dave went, okay. I mean, that's literally how we work. And for it to pay off this way for podcasting, it is the culmination. This is the last thing I'll do, but I'll probably be doing it for the rest of my life. So Podfather, value for value, I don't know. All I ever want, I just want a plaque.
So I really appreciated the time that Adam spent with us. Again, value for value and working in the call to actions. I think anyone who listened to this podcast just now, like, you know what, I want to try this. Number one, you can do this stuff at Castos, FYI. But number two, the value for value thing is it's a mindset. I hate to say it's a culture. I don't want to make it sound like you have to like shift everything, because in terms of podcasting, do value for value, do advertising, do direct sponsorship sales, do everything. Like, as a starving artist myself, do whatever you can to get paid. But again, the value for value thing is something that is not just about the money, but about connecting with the community and finding the people who want to support you as an independent creator in ways that are not just exchange money. The money helps, of course, but other folks can jump in and do things like promote the show, build a community, connect with others. And that's what really drives me to want to institute the value for value stuff with what we do at Castos and with our creators as well.
And, he also mentioned something, because you said, things beyond money. Adam made a passing reference to something that I think is actually central to a lot of the conversations we have about ownership and autonomy and distributing your art. And that was when he mentioned, people getting deplatformed. Now, I think actually there's a lot of nuance there, and that would actually, when we talk about like deplatforming and people's perception of what they think censorship is, that's a whole other conversation. And I don't even know if audience is the best place for it. But I'll give an example. I once worked on a project that did get deplatformed from Spotify, actually for a reason that on the surface was pretty legitimate. We were repurposing an artist I was working with repurposed his own music. And you can't just distribute music via an RSS feed or Spotify will take it down. The reason being that artists depend on the plays on Spotify to get whatever small percentage Spotify gives them. Again, a whole other conversation. Anyway, the logic behind it was actually pretty sound, I would think, objectively. Actually, yeah. But it was this guy's own music. And all of that was to say was we never actually got to talk to another human being at Spotify. So it sucked. We just got taken off of Spotify. Was it the end of the world? No. It was still distributed on Apple and Stitcher and Amazon and Google and all the other ones that pull from Apple's directory, and it lives on his website. All of that is to say is, had Spotify been the only place that was playing podcasts, we would have been screwed. So I think there's things, again, the money is important, and don't leave any stone unturned when it comes to funding your podcast. Grant funding as well. That's something we've talked about here on Audience too. But there are things beyond money, I think, to consider when we talk about centralized versus decentralized. And to me, that example, I think, lives in my mind as an experience that thought, wow, if we're going to go towards more centralized podcasting, there's got to be a little more transparency in why shows get taken down. But as creators, we have RSS in our back pocket to be like, oh, well, fine, Spotify doesn't want us. We'll push this somewhere else. It's not ideal, but it's, it is an option and a tool for creators.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you heard the difference, the points of view, especially in the broader topic of centralized, decentralized versus decentralized, between this episode with Adam, last episode with Tanner.
This has all been very instructive to me. I lean more towards the value for value open source for the reasons I just laid out. I don't think you want to be at the whims of an algorithm, because I like to believe in the situation I just described with Scattershot Symphony, the name of the podcast I was working on. I'd like to believe that if I got to talk to another human being, we could have come to an arrangement. But like, look, I get where you're coming from. This is an extenuating circumstance.
Coming up in the third part of the story, we have Juleka Lantigua of LWC Studios, Sky Pillsbury from the Squeeze podcast newsletter, and Sam Sethi, co-host of Podland. What we were after here is having this sort of well-rounded approach. We've sort of started with Tanner from more of the Spotify closed-sourced advertising side of the house, right? Algorithms, data, giving it to the creators, but tax us platforms. And then we had Adam Curry, of course, Podfather, helped get this whole industry moving, value for value, podcasting 2.0, open source. We really saw both sides of the spectrum, but with some good crossover. I feel like I think we're all like saying the same things for the creator at the end of the day, but maybe taking two different paths to get there. And I think our third episode is really going to maybe glue all of these perspectives together. You heard a little bit of Juleka on the first episode of the series, and then Sky sort of right up there against with Adam. And now you'll have Sam and all of them come together here and wrap this up.
I feel comfortable saying we did. I guess everyone will decide for themselves after hearing all three episodes. But I think we did a good job.
Hey there, listener. It's Matt. Before you go, I want to offer you, the aspiring podcaster, two special items. Number one, if you haven't started a podcast yet, or you want to find a better podcast hosting company, start here at Castos. Use our coupon code AUDIENCE20, that's AUDIENCE20, when you sign up for a new account at castos.com. Start a podcast like the one you just heard, or about gluten-free muffins, whatever it is, will help you get your podcast out into the world. Number two, did you know that our academy is free? Enroll today for free at academy.castos.com. Get access to our courses, videos, and templates, all for free. Thanks for listening to the Audience Podcast today. We hope we're helping you become a better podcaster. All that's left for you to do is share this episode on social media. Bye for now.